Good afternoon. Oh, you can be more enthusiastic than that. I know we're towards the end of the conference. Good afternoon. All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for sticking with us. And so, first and foremost, I would say this: congratulations on a fantastic event. I was in Kansas City at another event yesterday, so I couldn't attend, but I was getting the text messages and the energy of the people in the crowd, the amount of participation you've had, the opportunities for learning, and then as we were sitting at our table for lunch, just the diversity of participants that have been at the conference. And so commend all the folks that were in charge of putting this together, and I'm sure those of you that are excited about 3 o'clock when you can say, hey, we're on the 1 yard line, let's get a touchdown and be done with this thing. So again, congratulations to everyone involved. I want to start by saying this, is that as you think about what you've been doing the last couple of days, you have really zoomed in on a topic: pig survivability. You've really been focused over the last 2 days. And you've talked about the science, and you've talked about the data, and you've talked about the people, to my understanding, as I've tried to surmise from the participants what you've learned. And the goal of this next session for you is I'm going to try to take all that and then zoom out and say, okay, we're here, we know what the topic of choice is, we know what we're focused on, but how does that impact the global marketplace or the bigger picture of something called sustainability? Which brings us to the title slide. Pig survivability equals sustainability. And as I look at the front of the podium of this particular conference, I wonder if the future holds that instead of the Pig Survivability Conference, it's maybe going to be called the Pig Sustainability Conference. Let that soak in for just a second. Because what you've been focused on and what this journey has taken us on to get to this point of this conference is not separate apart of the challenges that our industry faces from a local, state, regional, and international audience. And so let's talk about that a little bit. If these slides will advance a little, I don't know which way you want me to shoot at here. Jason, you got the magic finger? Oh, there we go. So I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to let you read through those, but I'm going to surmise the slide. And I would argue that everybody in this room believes that pork is a protein that's essential for human health. Pig farming is a natural part of a sustainable, balanced environment, and that pork production provides honorable, important work as part of a resilient food system, feeding and nourishing the world and connecting people and cultures through the enjoyment of food. All of us, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, all of us should believe that that's true. That's why we're in the business, right? Now, my job every day on your behalf and representing the 62,000 plus pig farmers is convincing others up and down the pork supply chain and the end eater that this is the case. So what we believe, what we're in, what we're engaged in, you're already on the path. I'm not here to convince you. What you've got to help and what we've got to do as a team is convince the others. Because I'm sure you've looked at your Facebook feed today and there was probably some things on social media that said, well, that's just not the case. It's just not the case. And so let's talk about the current food landscape. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about pig survivability, but what we're in is the food business, folks. And you may want to talk about restaurants and food waste, sick pigs, pigs that don't make it to market, that's food waste, right? So we play into this global landscape. But let's talk about food as a whole. When you look at the world population today, 1 in 4 people are food insecure. It's hard for us to understand that as the American people. It's hard for us to understand that after a fantastic lunch. But there are folks that still in this world wake up every day hungry and undernourished. Does pork play a role in that solve? Absolutely it does. The other thing that's happening to us from a food perspective in a global population is obesity has tripled since 1975. And we've been on this mission to feed the world, and you've heard that, and I heard it a little bit from the session I sat in, and I want to change that paradigm from feeding the world to nourishing the world. Because there's a lot of people in this world that are intaking a great deal of carbohydrates in foods that are creating the obesity problem because they're full and happy, but they're not nourished with the proper nutrition. Pork is part of that solution. It not only fixes that poverty that hunger that we face globally, but it also fixes this problem that we've got something called obesity. Pork is part of that solution. And so, as you think about pig survivability and maximizing the amount of those pigs that go on to market, and the last time I checked, the number one consumed protein in the world is what? Pork. We need more of it to help be a solve for these two situations. So I want to set the landscape for you a little bit currently of my day-to-day work, in that critical conversations around sustainability are happening now. Our customers, and when I say our customers, as producers, academicians, industry representatives, allied industry in the room, our customers, retail, right? Quick service restaurants, white tablecloth restaurants, food service, they want to lead the way with solutions for their customer, which is the end eater. And the consumer and the customer are demanding these things called, and you can use air quotes if you choose, sustainable products. We're positioned to be part of the solution. Now, one of the favorite part of my jobs representing the 62,000 pig farmers is sitting in the corporate suites of our customers. I get to go in front of Costco. I get the opportunity to talk to Walmart. I had the opportunity the other day to be in front of McDonald's. That's some of the favorite parts of my job. It's also part of the scariest part. Why? They ask really hard questions. They have really big expectations. Sometimes they have irrealistic demands. And so far the questions are what you would expect, I think: sow housing, animal welfare, antibiotics, environmental stewardship. But think about for a minute why you're here. The question hasn't come to me yet about, tell me how many of those pigs are born, and tell me how many of those pigs actually make it to a carcass and to someone's plate. That question has not been asked of me yet. Think about if the question were to come, and you think about those questions in your career that you don't want to get, right? Those nightmare questions. How is my response, or what is the answer? Does that make sense? Because the reality is, if we're Coca-Cola and we're making aluminum cans, and I'm the CEO of Coca-Cola, and I says, of those 4 aluminum cans, one of them's not going to make it to market and have soda in it, what is I as the CEO of Coca-Cola going to do? I'm going to make a change. Can we relate to that relative to pig survivability, right? If I'm the head of General Motors and I'm building Silverado pickups, and my team comes to me as the CEO and says, hey, of those 4 Chevy pickups that come off the line, the Ford folks are going to like this, only 3 of them somebody's going to be able to drive. The Ford people are saying, well, obviously it's a Chevy, right? You get my point. We have an opportunity to lean in and be part of the solution. So let's shift gears then to One Health. There's a lot of, I'm sure, DVMs in the crowd, some in the front row. They understand One Health. They've been doing this for a long time, and pig farmers have been doing it a long time. The population, the world population which I deal with, the sustainability experts now are really on this train. Hashtag One Health Initiative, right? We need to impact environmental health in a positive way. We need to impact animal health in a positive way. That ultimately leads to human health, which is One Health Initiative. When I look at this, I get excited because what? We as pig farmers have done this for, what? Decades. So part of the game here is take credit for what we've done, but I'll also tell you the marketplace is more interested in what do you intend to do. There's one key factor missing on this particular diagram, in my opinion, when we think about this from the world we live in every day as farmers, academicians, and the like in the audience. Is in the middle should be healthy economy, healthy economics. Because all of these things are super important, but if the people in this room cannot manage a P&L and be profitable, it's not economically sustainable, and the next generation of farmers don't have the opportunity to farm. But it's at the center of what we do. Now, do I lead in that with certain audiences? No, but let's not lose sight of pig survivability. There's a business case. Sow longevity, there's a business case. You know the numbers. You've refined the numbers. You've synthesized the data this week, right? But beyond the business case, there's huge other impacts in the marketplace. So sustainability, and you say, well, Brett, what's the path? What's the math? What's the roadmap? What's the North Star? And one of the things I would challenge all of us in the room to learn as we move and go forward and get on the airplanes and go home and get excited about the conference is the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. the UN SDGs. I see some heads nodding in the crowd, and those heads tend to be the younger generation. You're passionate about this, you live it, you understand them, and you understand not only your generation, but the eaters of pork today. We are going to change the world by 2030, and we're going to do it through the UN SDG framework. And guess what? Within that framework, 50% of the companies across the world use that framework to describe their path forward of success relative to sustainability. So what does that look like for the pork industry? How do we bring it home to Omaha? So the pork industry has been on a journey since March of 2020 to set goals and metrics and key performance indicators in the realm of sustainability. No different than what we've done on our farms for decades. Weaned estrus intervals, right? Pig mortality rates, feed efficiency, right? Average daily gains. Pick your metric. We're all about data as pig farmers. Matter of fact, sometimes we have so much data we're not so sure how to package it up and use it. Same thing's coming now in the sustainability space. We're taking it a step further to say beyond just those traditional production metrics we've measured forever, we've got to up our game on some of these other things. And some of these other things are soft. And I'm guessing over the last 2 days, although I wasn't part of the conference, you probably talked about people, didn't you? I bet. Whew, that stuff's hard to measure, isn't it? But the pork industry goals that we've been working on, that's a producer-led initiative, circle around environment, our people, our communities in which we operate, food safety, animal well-being, and public health. To the seasoned veteran academicians, DVMs, and producers in the room, those should look familiar to you. One of my favorite veterinarians is nodding his head in the front row because he knows that those are the 6 ethical principles called We Care, in which the pork industry was ahead of the game relative to sustainability because We Care has been around for over a decade, 13 years. And now we're just taking it and we're bolstering it. And so the build says, take those 17 SDGs and can you map that to a framework of success for sustainability for the pork industry? And the answer is yes. When you talk about zero hunger in the world by 2030, you folks in this room have worked on an important topic that's going to help us get there. When you talk about clean water, sanitation, responsibility of workplace, diversity of the land, you all play a role in that. And so not only are we going to have an impact domestically, you're going to have an impact from a global perspective. So take credit for what you've done, but there's more to do, folks, isn't there? And you heard me say earlier, part of this is take credit for what you've done, but when I represent our product all over the world, they're liking to hear some of that, but what do they ask? What are you doing next? Can you do more? And I know some of our producers in the crowd are saying, but Brett, they keep moving the goalpost. Yes, they do. And they will continue to move the goalpost. And if we want to build trust, confidence, grow our business, we have to be thinking along with our customer and our end eater. Sow lifetime productivity. Grew up on a farm, still have sows, worked in a lot of the big commercial units all the way through my academic career. And there's an epiphany that hit me this morning driving to Omaha is, do we look at the sow now like a flat screen TV? Or where's he going with this? Jim Pillen was giving the one-word answers and talking about, can you remember these things? And I'm going to show my age. I actually remember when your TV would break, you would call someone called the TV repair person to come fix it. Do we do that today? No, it's the flat screen disposable TV methodology. Cool technology, cool tool, cutting edge, does all these whiz-bang things, but when that thing down here breaks, bring in the new. So from a culture, people mentality, how are we thinking about sows? Are they just disposable? Or are they potentially one of our greatest assets? Pig survivability, you've talked about it. I touched upon it for a minute. When people talk to me about being on a farm, growing up on a farm, had the opportunity 2 years ago to be in downtown Tokyo talking to a bunch of our biggest importers of pork. They're like, Brett, what was the hardest thing about growing up on the farm? Manure, shoveling manure, getting up early, staying late, fighting the blizzards, right? Grew up on a diversified livestock operation. I said, here's the things that were the hardest. Euthanasia. Don't like it. Never did, still don't. Whether it's a baby pig that's born today, or whether it's a sow or the heat-checking boar, still don't like it. The other thing I didn't like was the coal truck. I didn't like to have to load animals on the coal truck. Didn't enjoy that. The other thing I didn't enjoy is taking coals to a particular buying station, because it made me feel like, as a stock person, that I had failed. And some of those things were out of my control, right? For sure. But as a stock person, as a farmer, there's something in your mind that says, if I could have just done that, if I would have done more of this, or maybe if we would have just tried that. But then there's the ethical decision to say, an exit strategy is the best strategy, right? I'm going to give you a little picture of a former life working for Zoetis in the dairy industry. Dairy production specialist. I had a lot of the dairies on the eastern plains of Colorado, the western plains of Kansas. Smallest dairy I called on was 5,000 cows. The largest one was 25,000 cows. My job was to work with the owner, and he'd say, Brett, you walk this dairy up and down, you spend all day, and you look at what's going on, and you report back. And he said, where I want you to start is in the coal pen. And I said, I want you to study the animals, and I want you to study the culture. And I saw a wide array of operations and types. There were some that managed, the staff, the caregivers, managed that coal pen, that they wanted to fix them all. Wanted to fix every one of them. And I'd say, the best thing we could do here is an exit strategy, right? The truck's coming tomorrow, and we need to get that cow on that truck to head to Liberal to become a culinary cow. And you may giggle at culinary cow, but that was a culture that we tried to create on the dairy, because she's not a coal cow. She's a culinary cow. She has value. Her value's just different now. And she expects, demands, and needs that attention, right? But it's time for an exit strategy. And I worked on some operations with some caregivers that said, that's the coal pen, we'll look at them at the end of the day. We'll feed them at the end of the day, and our attention to details on these fresh cows. They've just calved. They're going into the parlor. You with me? Those things of managing that social license to operate with the team that you lead and coach are imperative. And the idea of nutrient utilization. Some of my favorite nutritionists are in this room. They've dedicated their whole life to this thing. And some people say, well, Brett, we can't make this pig even more efficient. I said, yes, we can. We may not be able to beat a catfish, but we can get better. Right? And this idea of nutrient utilization is beyond just taking the row crop in which we feed and turning it into a pound of pork. It's where are we losing that along the way, and respiration rates and nutrient loss in our manure, and where's those nutrients going? There's a whole cycle here that the next conference is about. Where do we focus there? Because our industry, I'll tell you, and some folks push back, Brett, be careful, our work's in the pig barn. Yes, it is. But I'll tell you, the non-government organizations, the environmentalists, and the others that maybe don't appreciate our business as much as we do, they're taking it all the way back to the row crop. So don't think it's not our problem. The last time I checked, and I'm a geneticist and a reproductive physiologist, so Dr. DeRushi's going to make fun of me, but the last time I checked, that the main part of a swine ration is corn and soybeans. Folks, that's a good thing. We figured out why we feed pigs that. It has a huge environmental impact too. And it can be both positive and negative. We own that because that's part of our supply chain. So I'll go through these fairly quickly. They should look familiar to you. For those of you that have been around for a while, for those of you that are new to our business, welcome to the We Care Ethical Principles. I like to think of them as pig farmers' values when they wake up every day. These are the things they care about. There was a fundamental change that was made in 2018 by a group of forward-looking producers, a task force in which I had the opportunity to lead. Even though these ethical principles have been around for over a decade, 13 years, they made one big fundamental change. And it's not just wordsmithing, I think it was vision. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, you'll see one that says, our people. Prior to 2018, it was listed as worker safety. Think about that for a second. Prior to 2018, it was worker safety. Slips, trips, falls, tag-outs, lockouts. These producers had the vision that said, we think one of our biggest challenges moving forward and opportunities is to augment our people in the communities in which we exist. Thank goodness they did it. And you've talked a lot about people the last 2 days. That's the future, folks. We know how hard it is to get labor, right? And I'm sure you've had that discussion. Recruit people into our business, right? Joey, we were sitting having lunch, and we need more Joeys in the world. And how do we recruit them into our business, grow them in our business, retain them in our business? And oh, what about the kid that's 16 years old in downtown Chicago? How do we create a business they want to come to work in our business as opposed to criticize our business? That's a big lift. We need to be part of the solution. That is the sustainability framework in front of you now for the pork industry. So ultimately, what's the equation for success? Got a lot of smart people in the room. I'm about equations too, but I'll keep this one simple. The logic is we've got these tried and true 6 ethical principles that the pork supply chain and our eaters invest in and believe in. I like to think of them as pig farmers' values. We multiply those values times the practices in which some of you folks in this room control. We just keep getting better on farm, don't we? We keep getting better every day. Sorry, I'm very biased, but pig farmers are the most progressive, proactive, futuristic thinkers, and they've proven it over time. Listen to Jim Pillen talk about getting pigs in bushel baskets so they don't go down the creek in 1964. Look where we're at today. We multiply those by practices, multiply them by proof points, but ultimately, folks, the picture on the far right hand of the screen means something. We're trying to build the customer trust or the consumer trust to give them permission to eat. That's hard for me to say. You're like, Brett, why do they need permission to eat? Everybody loves bacon. Yes, they do. But I can tell you, I get a different view of the world in which I had an opportunity to sit on a consumer panel where my camera was off. I had to be on mute. We interviewed what these people, 50 people, identified themselves as heavy users of pork. They had some really big concerns about what we do as farmers. And they identified as heavy users and eaters of pork. Can you imagine Brett Kaysen off camera, on mute? They're spewing some of this stuff that's not factual. I almost had to climb through the computer screen. But what it told me is, Brett, give them some additional data and proof points that you care. It's not good enough like it was 13 years ago where you said you care, you put your hand over your heart, and you're dedicated to continuous improvement. That was a good thing at its time. The new eater says, trust but verify. Or as Dad used to tell me growing up in the West, trust everybody but brand your calves. Trust but verify. So where are we headed? There's 4 numbers on this slide I want to point out to you. 28.3 billion, 131.6 million head, 157.5 million head, and almost 30 million more. What does all those numbers mean? Dr. Jason Lusk, some of you in the room may know him, fantastic economist at Purdue University, says the numbers are the numbers. That's what the people in this room helped create in 2020. Fantastic job. But if we had to produce that same amount of pork with 1990s technology, it would almost take 30 million more market hogs to do it. We've done a good job. We're sustainable. We're producing more with less. The data shows it, right? But think about the data you've seen over the last 2 days. Can we get better? Yes. We can produce more billion pounds of pork with fewer pigs and have a bigger impact and a less environmental impact, and there's a business case from a profitability perspective. So I want to share with you, and time doesn't allow today, but the pork board, with the support of farmers, as I said earlier, is going on a journey. Setting goals, setting metrics, setting key performance indicators underneath every one of those 6 ethical principles so that we can now measure, monitor, and report not only in-barn work, but also some of these other things in which our eater is expecting us to do. Just give you a really quick glimpse here is that we've designed a system that is a locker room of data. And if you're a producer in Iowa and you want to put your data into this information, pick the data. It could be propane use, could be water use, could be pig survivability, could be sow longevity. You pick your metrics, put it in that set of database, we lock it up, but then create it into a form that's palatable to people beyond producers to prove how good of a job you're doing. The same thing is we could take that locker room of data from that Iowa pig farmer, from their other cohorts that's blinded, and put it into an Iowa state pork report that says you may have heard and think that we're polluting the waterways in the Raccoon watershed. It's simply not true. Let me show you why working with our row crop brethren, how we're keeping the soil in place and actually improving water quality. You may think we abuse our animals. It's just simply not true. Let me show you the data, some of the data which you generated. The magic happens here, team, is when we can take that data set, roll that up into a blinded aggregated report, and report on behalf of U.S. pork industry sustainability. And I know there's several of you in the room that are farmers and you're leveraging your competitive advantage, and I applaud you for that. That's what we should be doing. It's a capitalistic approach. But I'll also be very, very clear with you, when I'm sitting across the table from the leaders at Costco, they're not asking about individual pork brands. They're asking, give me trust and confidence in one brand, P-O-R-K. Why should we continue to buy it? Why should we continue to have it in our meat case? And our international customers are asking those same questions. So what we've done, and we've come on a journey starting in March of 21 this year, is that we've been going farm to farm, inputting data from farms, production data, environmental data, air data, propane data, putting it into a report so a farm could say, here is my information. But it wouldn't be a traditional report like we would think of it, or as I would think of it as a PhD scientist. It's actually a report that takes science and puts it into sound bites. Because a lot of the folks that we're trying to get trust and confidence from up and down the pork supply chain don't understand average daily gain. They don't get feed efficiency. They've heard of carbon, they've heard of greenhouse gas emissions, but what does that really mean, right? And so what we're doing is trying to put this science into sound bites for individual farmers to leverage as they need it. And not only do they get a path of where they're at today, but they also, in typical pig farmer form, they get a path of where the future is. So in what you folks have done your entire lives, no matter your career in the room, here's where we're at today. We do benchmarking in this industry, don't we? But where are we headed for the future? So they get a sustainable continuous improvement plan. And that's just beyond the environmental pieces. The magic in bringing it home for what you've done the last 2 days is you could start to incorporate sow longevity, pig survivability into these types of reports and use the denominator in what you wish. What do you mean, Brett, by the denominator in which you wish? There is a day coming that says, how many resources did it actually take to produce 1 pound of edible pork product? That day is coming. It's on the horizon, it's not far off. And there's no better way to figure that out than with actual farm data. And so the ideology of the more pigs we save, right? The more pounds of pork we produce in a more efficient manner with what? Less inputs. Take that traditional finishing barn in the Midwest, right, Doc? Boy, it takes propane, it takes energy, it takes water. If we can keep more pigs alive through that system using less inputs, we're more sustainable. And so the goal with this data and this journey that we're on together is, we hope, because we're all data driven here in this room, that taking that and putting it into sound bites will give customers the opportunity and the permission to continue to eat pork and come back and want to eat more. Because that's what they want. The new generation of eaters, some in this room say, I want to feel good at what I'm buying, purchasing, and consuming beyond just the basic necessity. We've built the United States to where you can make those choices with your pocketbook. Yes, there's some people in the globe that just want a piece of protein, but here at home, people have choices. And if pork is not relevant in some of the things that you've talked about the last 2 days, and hopefully some nuggets you've got out of this talk, they will go to a different protein. We spend $2 to $3 million of checkoff dollars a year that tells us that that's the case. And that is science, by the way. But this also allows us to take credit for what we've already done, right? Let's revert back to what Jim taught us earlier. Look back to what Dr. Lusk taught us. We've done a really good job. Let's take credit for some of that. But again, remember, they're wanting to know where we're going. You've heard forever, I want a transparent food supply chain. I want to know where my food comes from. Anybody heard those things? That's not going away. And there's days I question and said, really? Is that really what they want? Or do they just want to go into the grocery store, have an abundance, and they're going to make a price decision? And I say, boy, that's where my head tells me. But then I go to the Google Food Lab, and I listen to venture capitalists that have a lot of money that are disrupting the food system, and they've got technology that you can implant into your tooth today that will calculate what you're eating and show up on your watch. That's real. That's real. That's food transparency. At the same convention, someone came up on the front of the stage and said, think about the food system as this. Think about me, this person. I'm going to come by with you, and I'm going to take a pill. You don't know who I am. You don't know what's in the pill, and I'm going to put it in your mouth and ask you to swallow it. How comfortable do you feel with that? Well, I know I wouldn't feel very comfortable with it. But he related that to the food system. He said, that's what you're doing in the food system. Pretty powerful, right? Trust and transparency. And at the end of the day, what drives me, what gets me up every morning, and hopefully you can see my passion for the industry, if not, I failed you today, is I want you to grow your businesses. I want more sow farms. I want more pigs. I want us to develop our domestic markets. I want to grow our international demand. And I want you to be able to do that with the opportunity and that social license that's not as hard as it's always been. And I know not all of this fixes it. I get it. But if we hone in on some of these softer things, this is what happens. Because it's our job as leaders in this room, and you pay me to separate us from the competition. Separate us from the competition. I like all proteins, no question. My job's not to disparage today, but my job is to be a champion for the one that we support, and that's PORK. But here's an opportunity for us as an industry to coalesce and get on the offense. Now let's look in the mirror for just a second. Have we ever told ourselves, gosh, we're always on the defense, right? We're always playing defense. Have you ever heard the saying, and I'm a producer, and it's like, gosh, some days I wake up and it's just like whack-a-mole. Crisis of the day, to put that out. Some of you live that every day. Hey, we can debate sow housing. We can debate antibiotics. You're not going to unring that bell. You can dig your heels. You can hold on to those steel pieces of machinery that you're passionate about. That horse has left the barn. Don't let this horse get out without trying to ride in the direction in which the rest of the world is going. This is an opportunity for us to play offense. And so I'll close where I started. We believe in this room that it's important and that pork is a valuable nutrition of choice that nourishes people around the world. We believe in this room that we can do that in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way, can't we? We also believe that no matter what your role and responsibility is up and down this pork supply chain, whether you're a DVM from Minnesota or Joey, or whether you're running a sow farm in North Carolina, it is honorable work to nourish people. But we have to do better. We have to be better. We have to think different. And we need to take a holistic management systems approach to solving which are some big global challenges moving forward. So I'd ask three things of you. If you're interested in learning more about the sustainability strategy on farm, please email me. It's listed there. I'd ask you to subscribe and stay connected to the Pork Checkoff website. There's a lot of good work going on there. We're not perfect. We've got to improve. We want your feedback there as well. And then obviously those of you that live in the digital social media space, I ask you to follow us there as well so you can see the journey that we're on together. And so with that, Jason, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for your time.